The battlefield lay quiet under the pale shimmer of twin moons. Metallic debris glinted in the cold air like scattered shards from a broken mirror. Smoke lifted in thin curling lines, but the guns were silent, and the shouts of soldiers had long faded into memory. What remained was only the stillness that followed conflict and the heavy echo of choices made against orders. In this quiet, a lone human soldier named John pushed aside a section of collapsed plating and tried to steady his breath. He had been trapped after the final exchange of fire, and the effort to free himself had drained the last of his strength. He pressed his hand against the fractured armor on his shoulder and winced as pain shot down his arm. He could feel the warm sting of cut flesh, but ignored it. A faint sound stirred the air near him, and he lifted his head. At first, he thought it was the settling of wreckage, but then the sound repeated, soft and thin. A whimper. John froze. The war had ended only hours earlier, and the field had not yet been scanned for survivors. The sound could belong to anyone, human fighter or alien rival. Either one could mean danger. Still, he listened. Again, a tiny cry. It struck him as unfamiliar in tone, yet unmistakably young. He pushed rubble aside carefully and strained his eyes toward a narrow opening where soft light reflected off something smooth. He crawled low and approached the gap. What he found made his breath catch. A small alien child lay half buried under beans and dirt. The body was curled tightly, as if trying to stay warm. Its skin was pale with faint blue lines that pulsed like dim light beneath the surface. Its eyes, large and dark, blinked weakly at him. John had seen the adults of this species on the battlefield, and they had been fierce in every way. Yet here before him lay a child who could have harmed no one. A child left behind in the madness of war. The cry came again, no louder than a whisper. John reached forward, but hesitated. Touching the child could be seen as an act of defiance against his own command. Yet he could not bring himself to leave it. He removed his damaged glove and extended his hand. The child stared at him with startled confusion. Its small fingers twitched, as if unsure whether to recoil or reach out. Using only his good arm, he lifted the beam pinning the child's leg and slid the small body toward him. The child gasped in pain, but once freed, leaned against him as if seeking protection. John cradled the fragile creature and spoke in a calm voice. The child could not understand his words, but reacted to the tone and relaxed slightly. He could feel the delicate rise and fall of its breath and realized it was weakening. John knew he had to find shelter and medical help fast. He looked around and saw a ridge of ruined terrain that offered a narrow path away from the field. He tightened his hold on the child and rose as steadily as his injuries allowed. Each step was a challenge, but he pushed forward. He did not know if his own forces would treat the child as a threat. He also knew the enemy would not welcome a human carrying one of their young. Still he walked, because leaving the child to die was something he could not do. Darkness thickened as he reached a collapsed bunker. With no better option, he moved inside and lowered himself against the wall. The air inside was stale, but safe from exposure. He tore a piece of fabric from his uniform and wrapped it around the child's leg. The child whimpered, but settled into his arms. Night passed slowly. John kept awake by listening to the faint breathing of the child. At some point dawn returned, and with it the sound of movement outside the bunker. The ground vibrated lightly, and a hum reached his ears. He tensed and drew the child close. A figure stepped through the entrance, tall and slender, with skin that glowed faintly in the dim light. Her eyes were a deeper shade of the same color that ran under the child's skin. She wore a suit that shimmered like woven crystal and moved with deliberate grace. John recognized the alien species immediately, though he had never seen one so close and unarmed. The child stirred in his arms. The woman lifted her head and fixed her gaze on him. John knew this figure could only be the child's mother. Her expression held wariness, but also unmistakable fear. Her eyes darted to the child and then back to him. She spoke in her own language, but John could not understand. Yet her tone made her meaning clear. She wanted her child. John raised his hand slowly, but did not release his grip. He was not sure if the child was safe enough to be handed over immediately. The woman stepped closer. Her movements were graceful, yet heavy with emotion. She knelt near him and extended her arms toward the child. John saw tension in her shoulders and the soft trembling that revealed her worry. He looked into the child's face. The small being gazed up at him before shifting its eyes to the familiar face of its mother. The child reached toward her. The sight eased something in John's mind. This was no trap. This was a parent terrified for her child. He gently lifted the small body and placed it into her arms. The woman held the child close, and a soft glow flickered beneath her skin as she pressed her forehead against the child's. John sensed relief from both of them. When she looked back to him, her eyes held a new expression. Not hostility. Something closer to bewildered gratitude. She examined the fabric around the child's leg and then looked at the torn part of his uniform and the blood still seeping from his shoulder. She seemed to understand that he had shielded the child with his own body. Her hand hovered near him as if she wished to offer help, but was unsure if he would accept it. He leaned back against the wall as exhaustion pressed down on him. She spoke softly and reached into a pouch at her side. She brought out a small device that emitted faint light, and she moved it close to his wound. John tensed, but did not pull away. Warm energy spread across his injured shoulder, and he felt the pain ease. The woman checked the device and repeated the motion until the bleeding stopped. The bunker remained silent except for the device's soft hum and the child's faint breathing. When she finished tending to him, the woman sat with her child still close to her chest. She studied John in long, thoughtful silence. The war had ended, but mistrust between their races still stood firm. Yet the moment in that bunker carved a fragile bridge between them. She touched the crystals on her suit and projected a faint holographic image in the air. It showed the battlefield where she must have lost sight of her child. It showed her desperate search. Then the image shifted to where John had shielded the child as debris fell. She must have accessed a battlefield scan. She pointed to the image and then to John as if confirming what she had seen. Her voice wavered as she spoke. He listened, though he could not grasp the words. Her eyes, however, told him everything. She was offering recognition, perhaps even a pledge of safety. The child reached out and touched his hand. The small fingers were warm. John managed a faint smile. The woman rose and gestured for him to follow. John shook his head. He knew that stepping into the open beside her could place both of them in danger. The war had ended, but soldiers on both sides were still on edge. He pointed to the entrance and shook his head again. She paused and understood. She stepped to the doorway and placed her hand on the frame. A soft hum resonated, and a pattern of glowing symbols traveled along the surface of the bunker. Something activated in her suit, and she seemed satisfied. It took John a moment to realize she had placed a marker of protection on the structure. She turned back toward him. With one hand, she held the child. With the other, she pressed something small into his palm. A crystal fragment. It glowed faintly with blue light, similar to the child's markings. She touched her forehead in a gesture that carried the weight of her culture. Then she stepped out of the bunker and disappeared into the settling. Smoke of the new morning. John remained seated for some time. His body ached, but his mind was clearer now. He looked down at the crystal. It pulsed softly. It seemed to be a sign. Not just gratitude, but also a promise. He could not know what it meant in full, but he sensed that it linked him to the mother and her child in a way far deeper than the simple act of protection. By midday, rescue crews arrived. Human medics helped him out of the bunker and toward a transport vehicle. They saw the crystal in his hand, but said nothing. They only looked at him with quiet curiosity. He reported no enemy contact. He simply said he had taken shelter and waited for extraction. There was no need to complicate things. His actions had not been part of any mission. They had been something he chose without thinking, something he would not regret. He spent weeks recovering at a medical station. While there, he sometimes touched the crystal as if expecting it to speak. It never did, but its glow soothed him. He found himself remembering the look in the woman's eyes when she saw her child in his arms, a look that surpassed any boundary of species or language. It reminded him that war was only part of the larger story between their peoples. Life had a way of revealing deeper truths that conflict could never bury. One night the station alarm sounded. John sat up quickly. The lights dimmed, and a request for immediate assembly echoed through the hall. He dressed as fast as his healing shoulder allowed and stepped into the main atrium where officers were gathering. A commander informed them that an alien craft had appeared near the station. Not hostile, not armed, but positioned with intent. Attempts at communication were received, but not understood clearly. Still, the alien vessel refused to leave. John listened with growing awareness.